working men unite. We must put up a fight to make us free from slavery and capitalistic tyranny. This fight is not in vain. We've got a world to gain. Will you be a fool, a capitalist tool, and serve your enemy? That was a question. Will you be a fool and a capitalist tool and serve your enemy? No! Shall we still be slaves and work for wages? It is outrageous.
No. Oh wait, I don't know. Is there anybody in here who has extra hands who wants to carry a sign?
One thing that happens a lot when we're up against big systems that feel unmovable is that it's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to feel like we're not significant, we're not strong enough to make a difference. And our minds are these fabulously complex and tricky hunks of stuff, and they tell us a lot of things that are not true. And so it does matter that you're here. It matters deeply. And just deciding that you're going to stay engaged and that you're going to fight the disappointment and the discouragement, because we're going to lose some battles and we're going to win some battles. And the goal is that we stick in there together. We just keep going. Here's some cool information that I'm reading for you that I think is important. So, science of climate change. Climate change happens when we burn fossil fuels and we burn trees, anything that has CO2 in its structure. We're talking about trees, we're talking about wood chips, we're talking about anything that has CO2 in its structure. So the CO2, it traps the sun's heat for its living, thus it is referred to as a greenhouse gas. There are other greenhouse gases, and that's mainly methane. So CO2 has a half-life of 100 years, so it hangs around. So picture something hanging around for 100 years. It's a lot older than me. So it hangs around, and some of that is still present from the first power plants of the 1700s. It hasn't dissipated yet. This means that it traps heat for several generations. And the most importantly, the CO2 is the massive amount that has been emitted since the 1950s. So we cannot wait for the CO2 to go away. That's not one of our options. We cannot trap it and dispose of it in any effective way. It's just hanging out. This is my hanging out pose. All right, good. So we can't just dispose of it in any effective way. Billions of money has already been spent on trying that, and it just doesn't help. Since it represents 65% of the greenhouse gases, we must stop using it as soon as possible. Why are we here? Boom, to stop it. We're here to say no more. The other main gas is methane, CH4 methane. And it also is trapped from that heat, and it comes largely from fracked natural gas at this time. And it also has limited emissions from nature and comes in considerable amounts from animal husbandry, but can be possibly trapped at the farm by methane digesters. So picture the animals, picture the farms, it's possible. Right. It is about 30+% of the greenhouse gases, although it is produced in much smaller quantities. But the wild card is that a molecule of CH4 is 100 times stronger than the CO2. So we got this action and we got this action. This one packs a harder punch. One take home from not me, but the man who wrote this for me to read here, from his science review on climate change, many in the media are misinformed and essentially ignore the CO4, including the NYT reports like Coral Davenport and some MSNBC anchors, progressives by any measure. Fortunately, CH4 has a much shorter life, just that kick, you know? It's about 10 years compared to the CO2. Are my visuals helping you? Yeah. Okay, good. It's helping me too. But over its first 20 years or so, it is a sizable threat to the Earth's ability to stop climate change before it gets too hot. So if you punch something hard enough, like the Hulk, it's just gonna be obliterated. If you smother it long enough, it's also gonna be obliterated. What are called clean renewable energy sources, such as solar and wind, emit no greenhouse and are readily available to replace the fossil fuels. Solar essentially converts sunlight into electrons, i.e. energy, electricity, Wind major, it traps the mechanical energy, and again, there's no greenhouse gases. Nothing else gets released. Nothing else gets punched or smothered. So, as Cecil was already saying, it is possible. There are small things we can do on a daily basis, little transitions, and there's also big things we can do, like show up like this and notice that we're not alone, that we're willing to try something, maybe be a little bit uncomfortable for one little part of our day, push ourselves to try something different. And that, my friends, is what was going to be said in some way, shape, or form from Professor Harvard Ayers.
So, what I'm going to talk to you about today is how we as a civil society grassroots movement can place unrelenting moral pressure on our elected officials so that we as a nation and the global community can rapidly transition to 100% clean, renewable energy in all energy sectors. Notice I didn't say nuclear power.
Thank you.
You cannot store nuclear waste, okay, and it's too expensive to build. And our goal is from Professor Jacobson at Stanford, and it's 80% by 2030, want clean, renewable energy in all energy sectors. And by 2050 or sooner, clean, renewable energy in all energy sectors. And some people say, oh, that's too radical, but scientists from 195 countries have said that's what we got to do, survive as a human family. And Michael Mann, top scientist in this country, says we have 3 years. Right, Avram? Where's Avram? Right. This guy's been passing resolutions for clean energy. Can give him a round of applause. He's what we call a superstar. So this is the most serious threat to the human family that we've ever faced in the history of our planet, and it's irreversible due to the burning of fossil fuels, cutting down our forest, agriculture. Climate change is happening now. It's not in 2100. There are record temperatures throughout this country and around the world. Phoenix, 128 degrees. They couldn't land airplanes. 300 airplanes could not land or take off. It was actually plastic was being burned. Iran, Iraq, 128 plus degrees. Hurricane Katrina and Sandy were the result of what? That's correct. So in Hurricane Katrina, it was actually sea level rise. It was sea level rise. And the people who lived down there will tell you that it was sea level rise. That's why the levees broke, okay? Because of sea level rise. Heat waves that are going to kill people and are killing people. And the big problem is the melting of the Greenland ice sheet in West Antarctica, and a gigantic block of ice is about to be, the size of Delaware is about to carve off of West Antarctica. So if anyone says that's a hoax, you may want to talk to them about that. What are the obstacles to getting 100% clean renewable energy? Well, we have Republican majorities in the House, Senate, General Assemblies, and a president who believes climate change is a hoax. His name is Donald, I call him the Trumpster, but I call him Donald Trickster, because he's very good at tricking people into voting for him. That's why he's president. He tricked a lot of people. And then we have an administrator, Pruitt, of EPA, who now has put corporate America in charge of EPA. You can say boo to that. You can say boo. So now they're not listening to the scientists, they're listening to Exxon and coal companies. So if you're a scientist and you work at EPA, you can lose your job. And about 30 of the most important laws that protect our water, our air, our land, eviscerated, destroyed by this one person named Pruitt. Don't you think it's time to fight back?
Yeah. Yes.
Now I'm going to talk about what are the solutions. What can we do to move to 100% clean renewable energy, 80% by 2030, 100% by 2050 or sooner. We need a politically and strategically unified climate action fusion rainbow movement. I know that's a lot of words. Just think Moral Monday, okay?
Yeah.
For climate change, Moral Monday. Establish a beloved community. Where's Susanna? Where's Susanna?
I'm right here.
So she represents the beloved community. I've been organizing for 30 years, and if you don't have love in it, it won't work. You also have to have some music and dance and food. God, it seems like something you guys are doing right now, right? Here in Asheville. And we have to have the critical mass and political power to pressure our elected officials to rapidly transition to zero carbon emissions forest protection, climate mitigation. But we got to work on the local, state, federal level, and we have to work on the international level, because a lot of the people who are going to be killed or become devastated by climate change, it's not their fault. It's our fault. And there are 2 coal plants in North Carolina that are some of the worst emitters of CO2. So what we do in North Carolina impacts the health of people in India and Pakistan. And right now in India and Pakistan, it does not get cool at night anymore. And a friend of mine who lives in Pakistan said that it can rain for 4 days in a row, don't stop raining. So what are we going to do on the local level? We could do what Asheville did. Right on for Asheville, passing that resolution. But we're going to have to pass them all across the state. Every city, every county, let's pass these clean energy resolutions. And the reason why we got to do that is because elected officials are not mind readers. To express our political will, you got to protest. That's very important, right? Protesting. I've been protesting since I'm 12 years old, and I'm going to keep protesting. But you also got to talk to your elected officials, because ultimately they're going to pass laws. The laws are either going to say no to building more of those coal plants and yes to shutting them. Wouldn't it be great if they had a solar farm right there?
Yeah.
Just knock that ugly thing. Isn't that ugly? It's ugly, isn't it?
It is ugly.
Have a solar plant there. How about a wind farm?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's why these resolutions are very important. We want to pass them all across the country.
Good.
Hundreds and hundreds of resolutions on the city and county level, because we got to show Congress and our elected officials that we want clean energy. We don't want to burn coal and natural gas. It's going to destroy the planet. And that means you have to establish working relationships. Where's the city councilman that just spoke?
Cecil, where are you?
If we could replicate him across the country, boy, that'd be something else. And just a few other things. We got to do town hall meetings and university symposiums in North Carolina, because a lot of people don't understand the threat of climate change. And the reason why is no one has taken the time to teach them. You know, I'm a policy wonk. I sit home and I like to read books on policy, but I'm a nerd, you know. I'm just a nerd that plays the bass. But we have to make sure that we're teaching climate policy and all the good things that can happen. Green jobs, millions of green jobs, right, for the unemployed. How about homelessness? We can end homelessness by having green, affordable housing that's solar powered and energy efficient. We need about 6 million housing units. You know how many people could be put to work? We said we're going to end homelessness. No more homelessness. Wow. No more unemployment. Wow. Green jobs for all and housing for all.
My favorite quote from Martin Luther King Jr. is, "We are not thermometers here to measure the temperature. We're thermostats here to change the temperature."
I like that.
And that's what these resolutions are about. We're changing the temperature. Every time we get a resolution passed, it changes the political atmosphere and moves us closer, moves the American consciousness closer to what we know has to happen, a complete transformation to 100% renewable energy. And that's what's happening, you know. And sometimes when you're doing it, it seems like you're not doing much, you know, but we're doing a lot. You know, again, you know, 10 years ago, if you had said that gay marriage would be legal anywhere in the United States, you would have been laughed at, right? And if half the states were legalizing marijuana in one capacity or another, you wouldn't have believed that 10 years ago. But that's a result of community activism and us changing the temperature, just like we're doing now. And one more thing I just want to say, including, in addition to this resolution, we're also, the Canary Coalition and 23 other organizations around the state are passing the We the People resolution, which we've gotten 2 bills introduced into North Carolina General Assembly, House Bill 453 and Senate Bill 354, which calls for a referendum in North Carolina saying that we want Congress to amend the Constitution saying that corporations are not people and money is not speech. Overturning the Citizens United decision and previous court decisions that have enabled so much money from corporate money to take over politics, by politicians, let them write their own legislation. we have to change that. And so I would urge everybody to get involved in North Carolina We the People campaign as well. This is the petition. If you want to carry more, we have more. Go to ncwethepeople.org if you want more information about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to sing a little song, and then I'm going to bring up a friend of mine. And this little song is one that you get to sing with me. It says, we're going to keep on moving forward, keep on moving forward, keep on moving forward, never turning back, never turning back. And I invite you to say we some of the time, and if you can claim it, you can say I'm going to keep on moving forward. If you're feeling slightly discouraged, just note it and claim that you're going to keep on moving forward. It doesn't mean everything's going to always go smooth, but adventures with bumps are really exciting. So it goes like this. We're going to keep on moving forward, keep on moving forward, keep on moving forward, never turning back, never turning back. We're gonna change this world together. We're gonna change this world together. Change this world together. Never turning back. Never turning back.
I'm quite honored to be here as the first woman CEO of Duke. I want to tell you that I feel it's really an opportunity, and you know why? Because it's a revolving door to more opportunities. As you know, once you work for Duke, you're the shoo-in to the North Carolina legislature or even the governor, good old Pat McCrory.
Our next speaker comes from a local organization here called Dogwood Alliance, and it works to protect our southern forests and communities. And I'm super excited to hear more from Adam here just about this. One of the pieces that is very important to me about all this is the only reason you show up because it's the world, but specifically you show up when it's like, this is where I live. I could travel somewhere to fight somewhere else, another battle, but this is our battle. This is home turf. This is right where we are. It's these trees. It's this water. It's where we're standing. It's this air. It's our home. So it is a worldwide effort, and this is our local piece, and we're all in it together. So, Adam, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Really, there was a milestone a couple years ago, which was the Paris Climate Accord, right? And everybody heard about that, and all these countries signed on, and it was the big action on climate change. Maybe wasn't perfect, but the one thing that both the governments and civil society could agree on was that we needed to get our temperatures to 1.5 degrees. That was like the science behind it, 1.5 degrees. And that's great, and we are doing that with actions like these, and we are doing that with shutting down coal plants and stopping pipelines. But the thing that I want to bring up about that is that even if, which we should be doing and are working towards right now, even if we transition to 100% renewable energy, we're not going to get to 1.5. And that's kind of defeating, because what we actually need to do, that's half the battle. The other half is actually sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, negative carbon, removing carbon emissions. Our trajectory is going up, and getting to 100% will only level it off. Well, the good news is we have the absolute most awesome, best technology ever for doing that, and it is our forests. It's our standing forests. And so what we really talk about in context of climate change at Dogwood Alliance is forests and keeping our forests standing as a climate solution. Forests are our best CO2 sink. They are our best technology that we have to remove carbon from the atmosphere.
Before I was elected to the County Commission or to the Asheville City Council, and before I got involved in the solar energy business in North Carolina, I was the director of an organization called the Western North Carolina Alliance, a local grassroots environmental organization now called Mountain True. And at the time I was the director of the Alliance, the biggest issue that we were focused on was air pollution in Western North Carolina. And the biggest source of that air pollution was burning of coal at Duke Energy and TVA power plants, including the single largest source of pollution, which is our power plant right here where we're located today. So back in 2000, we were one of the groups that formed a coalition to advocate for what became known as the North Carolina Clean Smokestacks Act, and a coalition with this excellent organization, the Canary Coalition, and Auburn Friedman was one of the primary leaders of this effort, along with other folks who are here today. And so we came up with the idea after petitioning the governor to clean up the power plants, and we're not talking about greenhouse gases here, we're just talking about traditional air pollution, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide that causes smog and acid rain. So at that time, none of the 13 power plants in North Carolina had even basic pollution controls to address traditional air pollution sources. So after petitioning the governor to adopt rules to require that, and him not doing that in the last year of Governor Hunt's administration, we decided to undertake a statewide campaign to pass legislation to mandate pollution controls on power plants across North Carolina. When this Clean Smokestacks Act was first conceived, very few people thought it had much of a chance of being passed through the General Assembly because it would require an increase in utility bills for customers, and because it was opposed by Duke Energy, which was one of the loudest voices in the political process in our state, and still is, of course. And no other state in the country had been able to pass such legislation, so what are the chances that it would pass in a conservative southern state like North Carolina? But after almost 3 years of work and by thousands of people, the Clean Smokestacks Act was passed through the legislature. How? Well, with the help of leaders from the medical community, it was pointed out that the health care costs from air pollution were far greater than the modest increases that we would need to pay to install pollution controls on power plants. And it turned out that it was not just environmental groups that cared about this issue. Thousands of people from the mountains to the Piedmont to the coast came out in support of this bill. It was doctors and nurses, it was business people, it was fishermen who don't want mercury in our streams and lakes, it was the parents of kids with asthma, and it was just regular people who love our mountains and knew that accepting the status quo was unacceptable. The other reason the Clean Smokestacks Act was passed was because, to their credit, one of the original opponents of the legislation, Duke Energy, came to the table and offered their support for this legislation. Duke acknowledged that the pollution controls would provide significant public health benefits and environmental benefits to our state, and they affirmed that they have the expertise to fully implement the pollution control standards of the proposed act. Once the mechanisms for how the pollution controls would be financed were clarified, Duke steadfastly supported this bill. But even with Duke's support, passing the Clean Smokestacks Act was hard. It was fought by other industry groups that did not want to pay any increase in utility bills, and passage was made much harder following the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001, and the subsequent economic recession that hit North Carolina hard. Legislators were scared of taking any votes that could be construed as hurting the economy or jobs. But people refused to give up. And in 2002, that bill that had been declared dead a dozen times became law in North Carolina with bipartisan support.
As an 18-year-old, my generation will feel the direct effects of climate change, of sea level rise, of more extreme weather than what we've been getting, the loss of biodiversity, 150 species extinct every day. But this can feel scary when you think about it, and it does to me too. But that fear is also power. We can use it to stand up and to let people know that that's not the world we want. We want to stand up for a world without fossil fuels, and that's the world that we can create. And we all need to do this together. Duke Power is considering building a new $100 million peaker plant, a third one. And this peaker plant would only be online during the peak hours, so that would be the coldest days in the winter out of the year. So a handful of days and then a handful of hours during those days for $100 million. Do we, the ratepayers, want to pay that? No. So who you just heard from earlier, Brownie Newman, is part of the Energy Innovation Task Force. And so they are working, it's a partnership between the community, the city, the county, and Duke as well. And so they're all working together to try to prevent this plant from being built. And what they are really trying to focus on is community solutions. They've invested in Buncombe County schools and replacing the lights with LEDs. That has, like, as a whole, eliminates 1 megawatt from peak hours. And another solution that I really would like to share with you that they are working with is Energy Savers Network. You've heard of them. Energy Savers Network is led by Brad Rouse, and their goal is to bring energy saving solutions to low-income folks around Buncombe County. And every $200 that they spend putting into someone's home, changing light bulbs, I worked with them and I put insulation on doors, that's what my job was. Changing wraps on water heaters, every $200 they spend, that person saves $200 every year on their power bill. So not only are they making these homes more efficient, they're making these homes more livable, and Asheville is very expensive to live.
She said that we have an opportunity to act, to show up. And showing up doesn't just mean coming and participating in marches. Showing up doesn't just mean coming and clapping and rallying. These are all important things. But showing up is the stuff that's not sexy. It's not fun. Sometimes it's a lot of fun, but it's the stuff that happens between the events that's everything. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I mean? And I'm really curious, how many people in here, I ask this every time, and I'll probably keep asking every time, how many folks in here are parents? And just get let me get an eye. Get some noise going. There we go. In fact, if y'all will, just stand up. Let's get some energy going here for a second. Y'all been sitting a long time. Come on, stand up for me for just a minute. Get up out of your seats. Come on. Because we're about to go out on the water. Let's get some energy flowing. Just do this for me one time. Just, if you really, truly, in your heart of hearts, believe that it's worth putting the time in now to have a future later for our children, then I want you to just one time, and watch the rafters, just one time, just give me a little jump and say aye. Just like this. Say aye! Awesome. That's good. I like y'all. But on a serious note, and I feel like I always end up being that guy in the room, but ladies and gentlemen and friends, we are dying. We wanted to do something that was educational. We wanted to do something that was fun. But I don't want that to distract from the seriousness and the urgency that we have right now. And it is not good enough just to show up and march. It is not good enough just to show up and post things on Facebook. And I appreciate all that do those things. We have got to get involved in the ways that we can show up. If you're a baker, start baking and donate a percentage of those proceeds to the cause. If you're an artist, then start doing art for the movement. If maybe you're a scientist, or maybe you're a student like Luke Shealy, whatever it is you do in this world, be it a retiree or an educator or anything else, you have a unique gift that you can offer to our children's future. And I've got a little girl, and she's 3 years old, is the reason I ask about parents. And I am horribly afraid for the world that she's going to grow up in. Right now, people talk about climate change as if it's this down-the-road thing, but 70% of the world's population right now, let me backtrack and say 2/3 of the world's population right now suffers from water scarcity. Right now. That's not tomorrow. That's right now. And just because it doesn't come out of your tap doesn't mean it doesn't affect you later. And right now, they're already planning for what do you do with the 40% of the population that lives within 10 miles of a coast. Y'all think we've got a problem with tourists now? What happens when those seas encroach? I was talking to a friend that came up from Florida for this event, and they said they're running right now generators in Miami 24 hours a day, 7 days a week right now to keep the tides back. And that's not from a storm. Does that make sense? And so my question to y'all is this. What aren't you willing to do for your children? What aren't you willing to do? Is there anything in the world you're not willing to do? And I'm going to guess most of you are like me, and the answer is no. So then the real question then becomes, what then are you willing to do right now to ensure that they have a future that is habitable on this planet?
With the bread we need for today, feed us. And the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of testing, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen.
So today I come to give blessing to all of you on the water, all of you here on the land. I give thanks to the four directions, the above, the below, and the within. May we always walk in peace, and may we always spread love wherever we go for our fellow beings here on this planet. We have to take care of each other, and we have to take care of this earth, because without her, we will be no more. So today I give thanks to Creator, this beautiful place. Let us try to keep it that way. Let us keep ourselves beautiful within, because when we carry beauty within, it radiates to everything in the universe. So, Creator, I give thanks today for all of these beings that are here with us, in peace and in love. And I ask that you guide all of us in every moment of our waking time and our sleep time and our dream time. Let us be your servants of goodness and love. Let us always strive to help one another. Amen.
frightens the children. Don't sing the songs about winning and losing. Sit down beside me, the green fields are bleeding. Sing me the music of healing. Sing me a song of a lover returning. Darker the night, the nearer the morning. Sing me the news of a new day that's dawning. Sing me the music of healing. Oh, the heart's a wonder, stronger than the guns of thunder. Even when we're torn asunder, love will come again. Sometimes the truth's like a hair in the cornfield. You know that it's there, but you can't put your arms round it. All we can hope for is to follow its footsteps. Sing me the